Do you hear that?
Sorry?
Do you hear that?
I hear something, yeah. What is
my
that?
My phone is ringing. Sorry.
All right.
Oops. That'll go off in a sec. It's done. This time we watched Season 3, Episode 23, The Castle of Fu Manchu.
A movie that's very, very, very racist.
Gee, who would have guessed?
But first, we've got some follow-up.
Yes. So last time in the Shower 13, Mommy Dearest was said to be about Joan Collins. That is not correct.
I don't know. I've been looking into it, and she's pretty nasty.
So they say, but not as nasty as the Dame of Deceit, Joan Crawford. But the movie's actually about. You know why? I know exactly why that confusion happened.
Sure, they're the same person.
Well, maybe in Hollywood, where everybody's the same, fake plastic people, Chris.
Yep.
But no, I remember in writing my notes about that, I also wrote about Anthony Newley.
Yes, this is what I was going to say.
Yeah, Newley was married to Joan Collins, and in fact, she left him over Can Hieronymus Merkin Forget Mercy Hump and Achieve True Happiness, or whatever it was.
Just like a nasty Mommy Dearest type would.
Mm-hmm. So that's the source of the confusion. Usually we're able to patch these things through in an edit, but it was too late.
Yeah, when it went through us, it went through somebody else even heard it before it went out into the world, and none of us noticed it because we're all very tired because it's 2020. But you noticed it, dear listener. You are very clever, and all of you wrote in to tell us about it, or you tweeted us, or you messaged us on the Slack that we have for people who are Patreons of the show. Yes. You let us know. And thank you for it, because we depend upon you. Everybody makes mistakes sometimes. And although it's uncomfortable to be reminded that you were wrong, it's important to rectify that sort of thing. It's important to not confuse the very evil Joan Collins, who probably is fine, I have no idea, with the very evil Joan Crawford, who I've never met her. I don't know. But that movie certainly didn't make her seem like a good mother.
Yes, and indeed, all money donated for this episode is going to go to the Joan Collins Appreciation Society to rectify our error. They rescue millions of Joan Collinses every day and provide them with food and shelter and a new healthy coat.
Yes, I think you're thinking about the Judy Collins Appreciation Foundation.
I was thinking of the Judy Bloom Appreciation Center. Because I have fudgemania.
I know, you've stayed at our house.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, we got a very nice letter from listener Matt from the lovely Pacific Northwest, who writes in to say, "Hey, Chris and Adam, finally got around to episode 78. Great stuff as usual. I really appreciate the effort and research put in to contextualize things like Atlantis and the like for the MST3K episodes you cover. Thank you very much. That's the fun part of it for us. Since you mentioned riffing aspirations on the episode, I wanted to share with you my experience attending one of Joel's riff camps in Seattle back in 2014 or so. I and 29 others signed up to learn from the master himself, the art and science and Zen, this is Joel we're talking about, of making funny over, in this case, short educational, quote-unquote, films from the 50s. 3 groups of 10 set off to rifferize a short, How to Sleep, in my case, which was performed the next evening for a paying crowd. It was exhilarating to hear strangers in a theater laughing at jokes he wrote. I had the extra pleasure of finding out Joel himself nixed a riff the group chose for one of mine instead. Walking on clouds, let me tell you. I wanted to tell you my story, as many I've related this experience to haven't even heard of MST3K, so thanks for letting me, brag a bit. As a fan of Joel's and MST3K since the very early 90s, it's one of my most favorite experiences in life. Cheers."
Ah, wow. See, I thought riff camps were those camps where they tried to prevent you from doing riffs. It was like fat camp.
Or sex camp.
Well, I suppose there are camps which prevent you from having the sex you want, yes.
I mean, that's a fantastic note to get I'm very jealous.
Yeah. In fact, I had no idea that Joel ever did anything like this.
Oh, yes. In fact, I've heard about it from one other listener at some point. Heard about also, I think, in the Seattle area. So maybe at the exact same event.
Maybe his joke was nixed.
Maybe it was his joke that got nixed. If that's the case, you two should fight it out. But yeah, no, that sounds like an amazing experience. I would totally sign up for that if Joel were allowed to come to Canada.
Yes, but alas, as master of the riff camps, he is banned from here.
I think that's why. I think that's why they don't let him in. I don't know. There must be some reason why he's never toured up here. What else? What else should we say? Oh, yes. As we pointed out last time, this episode, which normally would come out on Donald Pleasant's Day, October 5th, didn't, as you probably have realized already. In fact, we're recording it on October 5th, so happy Donald Pleasant's Day, Adam.
Yes, happy Donald Pleasant's Day to all, well, for he's a jolly good fellow and all that. I am celebrating in my own way because I am wearing the Megaphonic Donald Pleasant's Day shirt.
Ooh.
Which is still available on the Megaphonic store, so you can celebrate Donald Pleasant's Day whenever you want.
Yes, but who knows how long it will still be available on the store, because it was meant for the centennial Donald Pleasant's Day, which was last year, and so we can't keep it around forever. We may put out a new Donald Pleasant's shirt, but the centenary one, that should probably be put into the dustbin of history only for those elect few who ran over right now to megaphonic.fm/store or went to the link in the show notes and ordered their shirt today. How does that shirt fit and how does it feel?
It feels beautiful. It feels like a warm hug on a cold day, which I understand is how Donald Pleasance himself was described.
Excellent. Are you going to be watching any of the Master's works after we finish recording?
Well, you know what? Had this been any other time in my life, yes, but I'm extremely busy and tired. So he's living in my shirt, and I'm afraid that's the most celebration I could do right now.
Well, you'll probably have sweet dreams about him tonight then.
Well, tonight and every night.
Fantastic. Well, we should probably get on to talking about this ding-dang episode already.
Oh, boy.
This time we watched Season 3, Episode 23, The Castle of Fu Manchu. We begin with the evil mastermind, Fu Manchu, who has developed a method to create massive icebergs in the warm waters of the Caribbean. He sinks an ocean liner as a demonstration of this new power, and he gets in contact with a bunch of world leaders and tells them that if they don't give in to his demands, he will cause even more havoc. Oh, and he's taken over a castle, the castle of the governor of Anatolia, which is to say Turkey, giving him access to a huge stash of opium, which, if I understand this correctly, he needs for his ocean freezing device for some reason. I don't know. But what he really needs is the formula to make the crystals that power that device. And the secret formula is locked inside the brain of Professor Hercules. Oh, dang it, we should have saved this episode for some Labor Day after we run out of Hercules movies. No matter, because this Professor Hercules is on death's door, so his main Herculean feat consists in, not talking and not explaining the formula to Fu Manchu. Anywho, all of this excitement cuts short the vacation of our hero, Nayland Smith, and his sidekick, Dr. Petrie. Nayland Smith is the Scotland Yard super spy who's always stopping Fu Manchu's evil plans, which you totally wouldn't guess from the name or from how this movie treats him, but, well, he is. Nayland Smith is, rest assured, a very good spy, and I am telling you this because the movie doesn't. Not well, anyways. And oh boy, there's a lot of plot in this movie. Let's see. Smith remembers that Professor Hercules had a theory about making waters freeze, so he checks in on the prof but finds out that he's missing, and so he visits his doctor. Professor Herc's doctor violates patient confidentiality and describes his heart condition. So Smith decides to bring the doctor and his female assistant along to Turkey with him, because, why not? Let's see, skim, side plot. At some point, the doctor and his assistant are captured, and Fu Manchu forces them, against their will, to transplant Professor Herc's heart with one from a young, shirtless, beefy guy. And eventually, they agree to do this, and after they've done it, they make out. 'Cause, But Professor Herc still isn't giving over the formula, except then he does. Well, anyway, so much for that. Nayland Smith leads an attack on the castle, and there's some confusing fight scenes, and after that, Nayland, the doctor, and his assistant all escape the castle just in the nick of time because, of course, it explodes. And from the destruction, Fu Manchu's spectral voice shouts out, "The world shall hear from me again." Ugh, let's hope not. The end.
Meanwhile, on the Satellite of Love, we open with Joel and the Bots singing a jaunty song that celebrates their unique situation and recaps the premise slightly for viewers.
We're the satellite of love, oh, the satellite of love. In spite of our situation, we're just fine.
After the break, Joel and his robot buddies are enjoying an after-party of massages and the promise of a Bette Midler dance-off and singing show tunes. Ooh. The festivities are cut short by the Mads, who promise one of the worst movies yet. For the invention exchange, Joel is stumped, so Tom and Crow present a long-distance telephone transducer. But Joel comes barging in with his own invention, the Big Head. The bots regretfully inform him that they've already done that one. In Deep 13, the Mads present a Joe Besser bomb that turns unsuspecting victims into the notoriously unfunny comic actor. Hey, I guess it's 2 bombs in 1. Crow reads an essay on what he calls bad actors, bad decisions in segment 2, namely getting into the thorny topic of white actors in yellowface.
Dear Miss, Sir, or Madam, I can no longer sit idly by on my little robot haunches and watch Caucasian actors being continually cast in non-Caucasian roles.
George Pal's 7 Faces of Dr. Lau, despite being a favorite of Joel's, and Charlie Chan are among those highlighted for this bizarre trope. Crow nearly breaks, but is given the encouragement to finish thanks to Tom egging him on. Everyone's upset about the movie, which delights Dr. Forrester and TV's Frank. In segment 3, Joel and the bots are pretending to be Shriners in light of the many fezzes in today's movie. At least until Tom breaks down crying. It's a pretty meta segment as Tom gets fed up, not only with the formula of MST3K sketches, but with the dreariness of today's movie. Again, the Mads are delayed to inform them that they're only halfway through the movie. The results are much the same in segment 4, when Joel tries to keep things light with a series of illustrations telling the story of Fu Manchu, but the bots aren't having it. Eventually, even Joel is brought to tears. In Deep 13, the Mads celebrate with pie. For the final segment, Joel promises to read a letter, but going with the theme of Dr. Forrester and Frank's victory, he's too sad to bother. Despite the gloating from Deep 13, Joel refuses to accept defeat and defies the Mads to watch the movie and riff it themselves. Hey, it's movie sign with the Mads.
Look at that building.
It's big. It's huge.
Here comes a car that you could say something about.
It's so old.
Anywho, Dr. F and Frank are unable to come up with anything, and in what may be a moment of empathy, Frank confesses that it's impossible to riff the movie. So, any celebrations from them are cancelled. Let's face it, kids, the Castle of Fu Manchu is just no fun.
So, Castle of Fu Manchu, as I may have mentioned last time, or may have edited out, this was the last episode from the season 2 to season 7 era of the show that I saw back in the day, because it was very hard for me to catch it on videotape. Kids, videotapes were things that you had to... Oh, never mind. Just look it up. We'll have links in the show notes, maybe.
Yes, consult your local Blockbuster.
So this is a really interesting episode for me because it's one of the few season 3 episodes that I haven't seen a million times.
Well, did it live up to the level of hype you had for that? This kind of experience of watching a brand new MST3K of sorts?
It did. What? I mean, I don't know, level of hype, I'm not sure about that, because I remember walking away from it the first time thinking, well, that's not the best episode from season 3, but... You know, it's a dreary, awful movie, and it's completely impossible to follow. Mm-hmm. But I enjoyed the riffing a lot. I loved the sketches, and it was nice to have sort of fresh riffs from that time period in the show to enjoy. So I had a very nice time with this episode. What about you?
I did not.
Oh.
I did not. I found the riffing to be really boring. I didn't find any kind of standouts. And the film is just the pits. I could definitely agree with that. And I didn't really like the sketches. There's something about MST3K giving up on itself that is like a trope that becomes like a major thing in the sci-fi era of the show, and I don't like it there, and I don't much like it here either.
So I agree that it totally gets sort of overused and tired in the later episodes, but that it feels like there's a lot less hatred towards it here. You know?
Well, you get the sense that the writers don't resent the very show that they're working for. No.
Exactly. They're sort of aware that, like, these are the sorts of things we normally do to these movies, but it just isn't enough this time around. And that ability to go meta is something that I can appreciate. But I do like that it doesn't have that sort of foul taste that some of the sci-fi versions of it have.
Yeah, it wasn't that much fun to watch. But hey, at least it's one that we can cross off our list as having done. Imagine if we had saved this for like the last episode. My God.
Sure. I don't know. I enjoyed watching this more than I enjoyed rewatching Pod People last time.
That's insane. That's absolute insanity, Chris.
Pod People hits higher highs, but I'm familiar with all of those highs. And the lows are just as low. And so this is just like Pod People, but I don't know it so well.
The lows are definitely not as low. But
no, there's nothing in this episode that I didn't enjoy as much as I didn't enjoy the sketch where everyone was flying around.
Oh man, see, I actually enjoyed that. So.
Oh, there you go. So different people like different things. And if we don't like an episode that you like, you know, it's okay. We can still be friends.
Tell that to some listeners.
Just saying. Just need to remind people sometimes. Is there anything else we should cover in this bit?
Well, I'm reminded. It's like this is it's kind of funny. It goes to show you how tricky it is to riff something that is confusing and awful, because it's like this is no more or no less confusing than Operation 0007, but that's a terrific episode. That's a really funny, fun episode, and I think that goes beyond. You know, hey, it's Neil Connery, because, I mean, look at this. Hey, it's a Fu Manchu movie. Did you know that they were still making those? Like, I wouldn't have guessed, lest I caught a glimpse of the fact that it's Christopher Lee in the title role. But yeah, there's a level of inspiration here that I think is missing. Because it's like, yeah, sometimes the confusing and terrible can result in real joy, but like here, I'm not seeing it so much. But it is really difficult, as I think they make a point of in the final sketch. It is really difficult to make hay out of a movie this bad.
It's also interesting to see the Mads, winning and then kind of forgetting what they're doing. Like they drive them crazy, which is kind of the goal of their experiment, right? Is to see what the psychological effects of bad movies on people are. And they break their subjects for once. And then it's like, haha, but now we will show how we could endure this. And as if it's, a strength competition. And like, that's not the point of it.
No, it's the rare case where, everything kind of backfires. If it wasn't for that last little speech from Joel, then like the entire episode would be like it would be the anti MST3K, or it would be the very sad finale to the show where the Mads finally win.
Yeah, I was expecting him to read that letter and then get everybody's hopes up again or something like that. But it's only because the Mads then try to riff the movie and fail that they manage to pull back out from this, from taking this L.
Yeah, it's a strange choice. It's a strange choice, but I understand why, because it's like they had simply written themselves into a corner.
Yeah. Oh, and also, I should point out, this is season 3, episode 23. This is the episode that came in between the 2 episodes of
Master Ninja.
Which is a weird pause in the Master Ninja saga. Let's just stop for a minute and watch Fu Manchu, racist movie from the 60s, before we go back to kind of racist TV show from the 80s.
Yeah, although, at least Lee Van Cleef's character was supposed to be white in Master Ninja. So
That's
at least
true.
It's like, thank heavens for small mercies.
Well, let's talk about that. Christopher Lee is white, right?
Yep, I'm almost entirely sure it is not Christopher L.I.
Sure. I mean, some people who have Asian heritage have the last name Lee do spell it Lee, of course.
Yes.
But yeah, so all right, here's the thing. I don't know anything about Christopher Lee really, except that he's a name that I have heard of, and his appearance in this movie where he's dressed up in ridiculous yellow face and where he pretty steadfastly refuses to act.
Yeah. Well, that's just it. You catch Christopher Lee on a bad day, and boy, will he not act. He will not act with the best of them. If you want to see a tour de force of Christopher Lee not acting, might I recommend Howling 2, Your Sister is a Werewolf, aka Sturba, Werewolf Bitch. In which, at the very least, Christopher Lee, while not acting, is wearing goofy 80s clothes and every now and then sports some real Devo-ish looking shades.
I mean, he had a look. Like, he was, as far as I could tell, 5 million feet tall compared with every other actor.
Yeah, he's 6'5".
He's 6'5". Okay, so he's slightly taller than me, but he towered over everyone else in the set. I'm sure he was wearing risers or something under his quote-unquote oriental garb.
Yeah, were those his Fu Manchus?
I don't know. So what else do I need to know about Christopher Lee?
Well, what you need to know is his association with, you guessed it, Donald Pleasance.
Oh, goody.
Yeah, there's a reason we chose this episode for Donald Pleasance Day. So he's co-starred with Pleasance a few times, notably in Ralph Thomas's A Tale of Two Cities, Guy Hamilton's Manuela, Ernest Pintoff's Jaguar Lives, and most importantly, Gary Sherman's Raw Meat. And with Raw Meat, the thing that really wins me over is that Lee was offered a very small part and agreed to do it simply because he would be working alongside Donald Pleasance.
Ah.
He was that much of a fan of the man.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Oh, and also, like Pleasance, he was a one-off Bond villain because he played the role of Scaramanga, the guy with 3 nipples and who fires golden bullets.
Out of his nipples?
Well, you know what? You have to get the director's cut. But he's opposite Roger Moore in The Man with the Golden Gun.
Now, what? Wait. Having 3 nipples isn't that big a deal.
Well, you know, the vestigial nipple is like every Bond villain has to have something a little kooky about them.
So a vestigial nipple?
Yeah, that's how bad it got in the 70s.
2 of my exes had vestigial nipples.
Weird. Were they someplace crazy, like on their back?
No, they were just below one of their normal nipples, and they're like half formed. They don't, which is common, as I understand it.
That wasn't like an entire row of nipples, like some kind
like
of
a cat. No, it was not. They were not cats. I have not dated any cats. They won't have me. Okay, so he did some movies with Donald Pleasance.
Yes, and that's not where the Pleasance connection ends.
Oh,
yeah.
For they were secret lovers.
No. Come now. Donald Pleasance was strictly for the ladies. I can't speak for Christopher Lee.
Okay.
But like Pleasance, Lee also served in the Royal Air Force. Or the Royal Air Force. Hello, I'm from Canada. By which I mean he served in the Royal Air Force.
Very different.
Yes. Far fewer casualties in the Royal Air Force, let me tell you.
Oh, ouch.
But yes, he was with the RAF for a while, much like Pleasance. But then he was moved to the Central Registry of War Criminals to essentially hunt Nazis.
Oh, they didn't consider him a war criminal.
No. He was
in charge of dealing with war criminals.
Yeah.
Okay. Did he meet Pleasance there or anything?
No. One of the things, though, is that apparently a lot of people were quite interested in this aspect of his career. And so they would ask him, it's like, so what was it like? What did you do? What can you tell us? And Lee gave the same off-quoted response, can you keep a secret? So can I.
That's good. I like that.
But yeah, all this time that Lee was, in the military, he wasn't acting. Like he was not a young actor. It's not necessarily something that he wanted to be. It was not a young dream, we'll say, that he had. It's something that happened when he retired from the military, and he just decided to become an actor on a whim. He was struggling to figure out what to do with his life, and acting is the thing that came up. It's not like Pleasance, who was acting ever since he was a youngster.
That doesn't seem fair, that you can just sort of decide one day, maybe I should try acting, I don't know, and then become a successful actor.
Well, I mean, it's a much better story than, and then he died penniless at the age of 31. But no, he was incredibly successful, and by 2007, the Guinness World Records gave him the most screen credits held by any living actor for having over 230 credits at that time.
They had to wait till Mel Blanc died?
Well, they had to wait until Donald Pleasance died because by the end of their lives, Pleasance had 238 IMDb credits, whereas Christopher Lee had 282 at the time of his death.
Oh.
British actors love to work and they'll appear in anything.
Yes, see today's movie.
Yes, luckily Donald Pleasance never played Fu Manchu. He was spared that indignity.
Oh, boy.
Now, sure enough, Christopher Lee did comment, "I'm surprised he ever bothered." But Christopher Lee commented on Fu Manchu in an interview. He said, "I never had any embarrassment over the face of Fu Manchu." That's the first Fu Manchu movie he did, where I featured as Sax Rohmer's arch-villain and deadliest of yellow perils. Alas, in the follow-ups, there was much to make me look shifty and suck my paws. My confidence in the face of Fu Manchu was justified. The picture did well. The Brides of Fu Manchu, the first sequel, was Tosh. The Vengeance of Fu Manchu, the other sequel, took me to Hong Kong for some excellent golf. The Castle of Fu Manchu introduced me to golf in Barcelona.
Oh.
So he did it for the golf.
Wow, that's interesting. Especially because it's incredibly British. The Brides of Fu Manchu was Tosh. Made me look shifty and suck my paws? What does that mean? I mean, I know what it means. I can figure it out from context. But like, wow, that's a phrase.
Remember, Christopher Lee starred in this movie at the tender age of 100 years old.
Well, so he liked golf.
Yes, but you know what? And that seems like the least heavy metal thing in the world. But as it turns out, Christopher Lee was a huge metalhead.
Oh, that's right. I know a little bit about this. He put out an album sort of very late in life, didn't he?
Yes, he did. So towards the end of his life, he had a heavy metal album claiming that he was a direct descendant of Charlemagne.
Which, who isn't?
Yeah, we've all got it. But more importantly, he put out a heavy metal Christmas.
Oh.
And also a heavy metal Christmas 2. Not the numeral 2, but TOO.
Of course, of course.
Which featured such singles as Darkest Carols Angels Sing and also Jingle Hells.
Oh, my. Did he ever get around to doing his heavy metal Hanukkah?
You know, I think that was the plan, is that Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, all the holidays of winter would be covered. But alas, no. Of course, you know, we're dancing around a pretty big one here, which is what is Christopher Lee best known for? And some would say Fu Manchu, I'm sure. But aside from your grandpa, maybe, no. It's like Christopher Lee is best known for playing Dracula in all the Hammer horror movies.
Oh.
Yeah. And Christopher Lee was also a little bit snippy about doing the Dracula movies.
Did he call them Tosh?
Well, I'm sure he did in interviews I haven't read. But he was so adamant after a while. Like, he did the first movie, which was an adaptation and a fairly loose one of the book. And as time went on and as his fame grew and as his budget, shall we say, as his price got higher, he was becoming more and more insistent that the sequels follow the books. That's why he's not even in the first sequel, The Brides of Dracula. And sure enough, there are Dracula movies that Hammer made where he's either only quoting lines from the book, regardless of whether or not they make sense in context, or he simply says nothing. And just appears growling like an animal.
Well, that's one option.
And sure enough, of all the Dracula movies that he made, what he considered to be one of the most faithful, largely because he got to keep his mustache, something he fought for in the Hammer movies, and lost consistently.
You can't have Dracula and a mustache.
No. Well, that's just it. He's described in the book as having a mustache, surely.
What?
Dracula needs a mustache, yeah.
I haven't read the book, I'll admit, but really?
Yeah, Dracula has a mustache.
Wow. Huh. That sure is a 19th century conception of Dracula.
Mm-hmm. And so, when it came time for a Dracula movie that he could be proud of, he teamed up with a little director named Jesús Franco
Oh.
for a movie called Count Dracula. I haven't seen it, but it's reportedly horrible.
Well, should we start talking about Jesus Franco then?
I suppose it's time. Now, Chris, have you accepted Jesus as your Lord and Savior?
No, I haven't. Even with all the Christopher Lee heavy metal Christmas albums in the world, would I accept Jesus Franco, director of this awful, awful film, as anything like a Lord and Savior?
Yeah, this is the worst. This is one of the worst things I've ever seen on MST3K. It is a terrible, terrible movie. Well, have you ever experienced a Jesus Franco film?
So I don't think so, other than this. A little behind the scenes here, because Adam had suggested that we do a segment on Franco, and I was like, I've never heard of him, and this movie doesn't seem particularly inspiring. And Adam was like, I don't know, he's kind of interesting. And I looked at his Wikipedia page, and he's kind of interesting, everybody. Get seated for this segment. He made a lot of films, and I don't think I've seen any of them except this one, unless there's one that I might have that I missed. Is there one that I would have that I'm not thinking of?
A little movie called Blade Runner. No, I'm kidding. Of course not. Of course not. No, but you're right. He had like he is the definition of prolific, because over the course of 56 years, he has 207 IMDb credits as director alone. Like, that's nuts.
Well, all right. Are they all as good as this movie?
Well, that's just it. It's like, I can only speak personally for the two Jesus Franco movies I've seen. I've seen an equally lifeless little movie called Blood-Sucking Nazi Zombies from 1981.
Okay.
And I saw a 1973 sex romp called The Demons about lesbian nuns. Neither of which made any sense. And it sort of reminds me, a friend of mine had recently messaged me. It's like, he said, myself and my wife, we tried to watch our first Jesus Franco movie, but we fell asleep, and by the time we woke up, the movie didn't make any sense anymore.
Yeah, I guess it's a hallmark of his work. I don't know. All right. So Fu Manchu was a reasonably successful property, although this was its final installment. Like, how did he get this gig?
I do believe that he did the Count Dracula movie with Christopher Lee before, but I could be wrong there.
I'm looking at his Wikipedia page, and it looks like it's the same year as Castle of Fu Manchu, but it looks like he had done The Blood of Fu Manchu the year before, so I guess that wasn't what got him involved in the project.
Oh, right. I'd completely forgotten that Jesus Franco did more than one Fu Manchu movie.
Oh, man.
It just seems like they ran out of directors and chose him because he was very, very prolific. It's like, this guy. Because, you know what, there's nothing in his kind of catalog. Well, I suppose there is, because he did a few like straighter horror movies earlier in his career that had like a certain kind of sexual energy to them, fighting up against like the censorship of the time. And so you'd be seeing that in the very, very early 60s, and some of those movies were successful. So I can see why it happened, but in the grand scheme of Jesus Franco's career, it makes no sense that the director of such films as Sexorcisms, The Inconfessible Orgies of Emmanuel, and of course, the immortally titled Vampiros Lesbos,
Oh, no.
would direct such a film.
So he did a lot of films.
Mm-hmm.
Several of these years on his page just have dozens of films on it, it looks like.
I know, it's crazy. He did, okay, so for his most prolific periods, I believe, he did 6 films in 71, 7 in 72, and 11 in 1973.
That's a lot.
Yeah, there is an exhaustive amount of Jesus Franco films out there. In fact, there's a film critic, I believe, who said something along the lines of, unless you've seen all of them, you haven't seen one of them.
But he did the sort of the cheater's way of putting out a tremendous number of films, which is to say, a lot of them are just porn.
Yeah, some of them are just porn, and indeed he cheated in some pretty interesting ways. Like he would basically recycle footage for the numerous projects.
More on that later.
He'd shoot with actors, and then this footage would show up in something else. But there's at least one performer that there's an anecdote about Franco. At least one actor got wise, or at least started to get wise, and demanded to know why he had to play two different death scenes. Franco just told him that the film was meant to be dreamlike, so it naturally didn't make any sense.
One of his later films from 1983 is called A Butt Crack for Two.
Aren't all butt cracks for two?
Well. That was followed up in 1985 by A Penis for Three.
Wow. So he filmed the penis on in two different death scenes because naturally that film's not supposed to make any sense.
I imagine so. Oh boy. Earlier than that, he had done a bunch of Machiste films, the Hercules movies as they were usually translated into English. And I'm looking here, just scrolling through the list because it's a delightful list to scroll through. Yes. In 1992, he put out a movie that somebody else had started and wasn't able to finish.
Oh, yes.
So, you saw this little tidbit.
Yeah. This is not even... See, that's the nature of Jesus Franco, is that him doing this is not the most famous thing he's done.
So in 1992, Franco completed Orson Welles' Don Quixote.
Yes.
So that's wild. Apparently it was released in 95 to disappointing reviews.
No kidding.
I'm so surprised. I wonder if it made any sense at all.
I'm going to say no.
I mean, Don Quixote, the novel, is, kind of a hot mess on purpose. Like, it's supposed to be that kind of book where the stories wander off into each other and so forth. But, I don't trust Franco to be able to handle that kind of plot with any skill based on this one movie that I've seen. I don't know.
Yeah. It's not fair. You can't judge him until you've seen Vampiros Lesbos or She Killed in Ecstasy.
Around the World in 80 Beds.
These are textbook great titles. You almost want to have a Time Life Jesus Franco collection commercial just so you can have someone joyfully reading out all of the titles.
You'll get Linda's Hot Nights, Tender and Perverse Emmanuel, Kiss Me Killer, Exorcisme, Celestine Made at Your Service, and of course the haunting Lorna the Exorcist.
Yes, but I guess another a reason to check out and to remember Jesus Franco is for his work as credited as Vampire Sound Incorporated.
Okay.
Yes. So I've never seen the famous Vampiros Lesbos. As I've said before, it's apparently his his most famous and best movie. But there is a track that's called The Lions and the Cucumber.
Uh-huh.
And again, I don't know how it relates to the movie. I only heard this magnificent track because it was featured in Quentin Tarantino's Jackie Brown. But please check that out. We'll have a link in our show notes. It is a delight. That track goes places.
Do lions work like cats where if you show them a cucumber, they get all freaked out?
I don't know. Or maybe you have to show one of a comparable size to a house cat, and then they'll freak out.
Oh, a prize. Go down to the county fair, get yourself a big cucumber, show it to a lion, see what happens.
Yeah. So, we got saxed.
This is not only the Castle of Fu Manchu, it's Sax Rohmer's The Castle of Fu Manchu.
Mm-hmm. And it's a real sax groaner, if you ask me.
Well, you didn't read the book.
But don't take Chris's word for it. Check your local library.
Don't take my word for it, because I didn't finish the book. I decided that as a good podcaster, I would try to read one of Sax Rohmer's Fu Manchu books. Let's back up a bit. Sax Rohmer. Sax Rohmer's real name was not Sax Rohmer at all. He was named Arthur Henry Ward.
Oh, I was really hoping it was short for sexual.
I mean, it might be. I'm not actually sure where he got the name Sax from, or Rohmer for that matter, but he needed some sort of pen name to write his stories for. He was born at the very end of the 19th century, and he started writing things in the early 20th century. The Fu Manchu series was serialized, which you can absolutely tell from the novel, in 1912 and 1913, and it was a big success. So eventually it was issued as a book, The Mystery of Dr. Fu Manchu, or in the U.S., The Insidious Dr. Fu Manchu, because he's a doctor. I think he went to Harvard.
Oh, I thought it was an honorary doctorate.
It might be. It might be. So I tried reading it.
How'd that go?
It's really racist.
No, I'm shocked.
I mean, it's also not especially well written. It's fast paced, like you can sort of zip through it, but it's real racist. So you know about the quote unquote yellow peril,
Yes.
which was this theory in, especially in the early 20th century and late 19th century, that people from East Asia were, as the Wikipedia says, an existential danger to the Western world, that they were going to come and destroy everything great about white culture, let's say, as it's just gross. But it really was big. It really was very popular. It's always good to have an enemy, I suppose. And it was an enemy that encouraged Europeans to, invade China, and led to a bunch of wars. So, yay. Anyway, this book is all about that. I was highlighting especially racist passages as I was reading it, and there was no shortage of them.
What a shock. So was the entire book highlighted?
Kind of. It wasn't just racist towards Chinese people, of course. Everybody gets a turn.
Oh, it's a buffet of racism.
It super is. I'm trying to look to see if there's something that I feel comfortable reading.
Oh boy. Sounds like the answer is going to be no.
Oh no, definitely can't read that passage. Oh, this is the passage I wanted to read. Oh, okay. Someone asks Nayland Smith, our hero, "Who is he, sir, exactly, this Dr. Fu Manchu?" And Nayland responds, "I have only the vaguest idea, Inspector, but he is no ordinary criminal. He is the greatest genius which the powers of evil have put on Earth for centuries. He has the backing of a political group whose wealth is enormous, and his mission in Europe," because he's in Britain right now doing some nasty stuff, "his mission in Europe is to," all caps here, "pave the way." Do you follow me? He is an advance agent of a movement so epoch-making that not one Britisher and not one American in 50,000 has ever dreamed of it. So the idea is that he is setting down some foundations and killing off some key people so that eventually China can invade and take over Europe, Britain, America, all that stuff.
Oh boy.
That's what it's all about. And every time this comes up, which is all the time, of course, you're hit with all of these racist descriptions and metaphors and implications. And of course, in real life, this led to Europeans having a pretext for invading. So, and the books even bring that up. There's somebody there who basically incited the Boxer Rebellion.
What?
There's one of the characters who's back in England now, and he's thinking of going back to China, but basically Fu Manchu and his cohort are trying to convince him not to, and also they're doing this by threatening to kill him. So that's a plot of one of the sections of the book, because of course it was serialized and it jumps around from sort of short story to short story every couple chapters. Oh boy.
Sounds pretty rough.
It's pretty rough. There's a whole section where they go to an opium den.
Yeah.
There's a whole lot of nonsense. And of course, you've got Nayland Smith. Nayland Smith is the hero of the novel. He's the James Bond, Sherlock Holmes type who knows everything that's going on miraculously for no clear reason because plot.
Right.
He's not the narrator, of course. That's Petrie. The book is told from Petrie's point of view, and he's just sort of hanging along. But yeah, I don't know. It's real bad. Don't read this book at all.
Friends don't let friends do Fu Manchu.
Hey everybody, it's time for the Shallow 13.
It's time for the Shallow 13. 13 little facts about this movie and episode, The Castle of Fu Manchu. Go, Adam, go!
Let's go straight to the Amazing Colossal Episode Guide. Paul Chaplin says, "This movie's mentioned every time we gather and talk about the worst ones we've done. It looks okay and the music isn't too bad, but the plot stinks like crap. We never knew what was going on. I've been to Istanbul, so I can vouch for the fact that the city in this movie does indeed seem to be Istanbul. That doesn't make it a better movie. I just want to let everybody know I've been to Istanbul."
And indeed, some quick internet research confirms that parts of this movie were filmed in Turkey, a country that Paul Chaplin has been to.
Paul Chaplin, one-time visitor of Istanbul, goes on to say, "The pattern of the host segments, with Joel and the bots continually breaking down while the mads gloat, is a direct result of how bad the movie is, and how hard it was for us to write. We write the host segments the day after we watch the movie the first time, so we're filled with whatever pain the movie provides. This time we couldn't think of host segments related to the movie, and we resented having to think about it."
MST3K writer and international traveler Paul Chaplin goes on to explain one particular riff. "At one point, we identify dotty old Dr. Petrie as Gadabout Gaddis. Perhaps you don't know who that is. Gadabout Gaddis, the flying fisherman, had a TV show by that name back in the 1960s. The show moved slow as the Red Cedar River in August. The elderly Mr. Gaddis would catch a few bluegills and mutter a few pointers, more to himself than to any audience he might have."
The reliable Paul Chaplin, who surely remembers a few phrases of conversational Turkish from his time in Istanbul, continues. "Gadabout Gaddis owned an airplane, so I guess he was a flying fisherman. But he rarely flew anywhere it wouldn't have been as easy to drive to, or even just walk. I'm afraid Gadabout wouldn't make it in today's world of 110 horsepower rock and roll bassmasters. Sure, Babe Winkleman catches more fish, but is he really a better fisherman?"
Okay, for those of you who haven't been to Istanbul like Paul Chaplin and don't know who Babe Winkleman is, well, he's a fisherman, an outdoorsman, who got famous in the 80s with his show Good Fishin', which seems to still be on the air. He's also got a hunting show now called Outdoor Secrets, the first episode of which is about hunting moose and caribou in Newfoundland.
But we digress. The footage of an iceberg slamming into a fancy ocean liner that opens the film? That sure looked like it was supposed to be the Titanic, and also sure looked like it was from another movie entirely, right? Sure enough, it's from the 1958 British film A Night to Remember. That film had a small role for Kenneth Griffith, one of the leads in Circus of Horrors, which also featured, you guessed it, Donald Pleasance. Happy belated birthday, Donald!
And that's not the only bit of footage that was stolen from another movie. The shots of a dam bursting are taken from the 1957 film Campbell's Kingdom, a film starring Dirk Bogarde, who, the following year, was in The Wind Cannot Read with, you guessed it, Donald Pleasance! Happy birthday, Donald Pleasance.
Oh boy, can we find a third Pleasance connection? Of course we can. The evil Fu Manchu's daughter is played by Sai Chin, who had a small role in the Donald Pleasance vehicle You Only Live Twice. Proof once again that all roads lead to Pleasance.
Our Petri dish, which is to say Dr. Petrie, is portrayed by Howard Marion Crawford in his final role. While Marion Crawford appeared in plenty of British series of note, such as Danger Man, The Avengers, and The Saint, he's best known for the Christopher Lee Fu Manchu series. He appeared in all 5 films in the series before his death in 1969, the same year Castle of Fu Manchu was released.
Despite the obvious lack of craftsmanship and quality on display in this 5th Fu Manchu movie, a 6th movie was in the works. At least until Castle of Fu Manchu came out and bombed at the box office. The project died when audiences' love of Yellow Peril and Christopher Lee in Yellowface mercifully died out.
This is the 4th and final appearance of Joel's invention this week, the Big Head. It originally appeared in Star Force Fugitive Alien 2 as Joel's Invention Exchange then, followed by appearances in War of the Colossal Beast and The Unearthly. Hey, if you've managed to make a head that big, you might as well make the most of it.
And finally, during a close-up of one of the Shriner guys, Crow quips,
Gandhi's back, and he's stuffed.
This is a play on the UHF sketch Gandhi II, which featured the tagline, "He's back, and this time, he's mad." It perhaps goes without saying that UHF nearly featured one Joel Hodgson among its cast, especially since we already talked about that in an earlier episode of It's Just a Show.
And that's time! One of the extended sequences in this movie, which for a brief moment makes a little bit of sense, is when the evil Dr. Fu Manchu is trying to get the doctor to do a heart transplant to the scientist who has information that Fu Manchu needs to get out of him, and basically forces him into performing the heart transplant. I thought that sequence was, better than the rest of the movie.
Wow. It's all a blur to me, Chris. It's all a boring blur.
It was quite boring. This was like a 20-minute long sequence. It felt like anyways. But it was kind of interesting because I was thinking about heart transplants as it was happening. And this film came out in 1969, which is a really interesting moment in the history of heart transplants. Do you have this little trivia fact at the top of your head, like when the first successful human heart transplant happened?
No, I'm no good at trivia.
Okay. It happened in 1968.
Oh, okay.
The year before.
It would have been topical.
It would have been very topical. It happened in South Africa with a surgeon named Christian Barnard, who successfully transplanted a heart, and the person who it was transplanted into lived for about 18 days before dying of pneumonia.
Oh.
Which was actually more successful than a lot of the transplants were that happened in the years to follow. There's a whole interesting history here where basically we didn't know enough as we were doing them, and people kept getting transplants and then sometimes just immediately dying and sometimes not lasting very long at all. And that's kind of unfortunate, leading them to basically say a few years later, you know what? Let's not do this until we know how to do it. But that happened after this movie was made. So we look at this film now and we're like, oh yeah, it's a heart transplant. Just, do it or whatever. But of course, at the time, it was a much riskier, scarier, more cutting edge proposition, which is kind of neat. And also made me want to look up the rest of the sort of history of heart transplants.
What'd you find?
Well, we've talked about some of the early history before. Way back in our episode 9, The Brain That Wouldn't Die, we talked about an important but gruesome precursor to the heart transplant.
Yes, we were talking about head transplants, weren't we?
We were indeed. And you might remember that there was a guy who transplanted the head of a dog onto another dog.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this was part of a process of trying to do these kinds of transplants. The people behind it, the Russian scientists behind it, were trying to transplant all sorts of things, but they were trying to do things with hearts as well, and developed some early techniques that would eventually become important. That's not to say that, it was a good thing that they did it this way, or that they were ethical scientists, or that they were even always being honest about what was going on in their labs. Just that there is a certain gruesome, terrible part to the history of heart transplant, which sometimes I found some articles on heart transplant that recognized this aspect of it, and some that were very discreet about the detail.
You might say mercifully discreet.
Maybe. We'll have some links in the show notes for some of that. But basically, yeah, they didn't do heart transplants for about, I want to say 10 years. There was very little heart transplant activity during the 70s until at the very end of the 70s, someone decided to start up that research again. And they started figuring out sort of how to do it over the course of the 80s and how to prevent, body parts from rejecting donor organs. And so, that has led to a significant uptick in the ability for heart transplants to become, I don't want to quite say routine, but definitely far more survivable than they were when this film came out.
Well, I mean, that's something at least.
About 3,500 heart transplants are performed every year, most of them in the U.S.
Wow, I had no idea it was so common.
Yeah, I don't know whether that counts as common or not compared to other types of surgery, but it's more than you might have thought.
Yeah.
And of course, there's a real lack of heart donors. Actually, one thing that I found out that I didn't realize before was who gave the first heart to be transplanted in, Christian Barnard's case. The recipient, I vaguely knew, was a guy whose name was Louis Washkansky, a 50-something-year-old guy who, as I said, didn't last much longer afterwards. But I didn't know who the donor was. It was a woman named Denise Darval, who was a young woman who got hit in a drink-and-drive accident.
Oh.
Yeah, and that is really striking, but also made me think about all those sort of terrible 60s and 50s movie tropes about, transplanting a woman's heart into a man's body and what that would lead to.
Especially because it was a criminal woman.
Yeah, I'm happy to know that actual doctors were not worried about such things.
Well, Chris, I think we have pilfered everything of value from the Castle of Fu Manchu. However, we do have time for one final factoid. Do you have anything like that ready for us?
I do. One thing we haven't talked about is how butt ugly a lot of this film was, and particularly how so much of it was shot in the absolute dark. It's really remarkable to see scenes that are just filmed with no light whatsoever. Like, I saw a few stills of the actual movie and a better version of it. I watched the trailer for it, and the trailer is much more handsome than the movie we saw, which is pretty typical. But there were several scenes that were so dark that you just saw vague glimpses of color and shadow in the background. And that couldn't have looked good in the original. It seems hard to imagine that.
Yeah.
But in one of those sequences, Tom says,
"Oh, come on, what is this? Curlian photography?"
And I wondered if, you knew what that was when you heard that riff.
No, though I did enjoy the follow-up riff. It's Larry Moe and Curly Photography.
Yes.
That did make me laugh.
So, Curlian photography. This is a weird form of photography that you may have seen before, but it's named after this guy, Curlian, whatever, who discovered early on in 1939 that if you put an object near a source of electricity, I'm not super clear on the details of this, frankly, but it creates a weird kind of image. It seems to have a kind of aura. And this type of photography got picked up by the Paranormal set. I will pop into the Slack a photograph of a fingertip that was photographed using this method.
Oh, cool. It looks like an eyeball.
It does, because you've got the central fingertip, and you can see a little bit in the picture. You can see a little bit of the fingerprint on the fingertip there. And then there's these weird pulsing lines of light coming out of it, this sort of aura effect. And so it's often been used to show proof that auras and such are real. Sorry, here's another fingertip picture for you.
Very Daft Punk.
Exactly. I mean, it's a really fantastic effect in terms of its imagery. Here's a leaf.
Ooh, yeah. Psychedelic. I keep expecting to see Captain Newfoundland flying by.
In fact, it was used in the sleeve of George Harrison's album Living in the Material World.
Oh,
which has photographs of his hand. I'm just reading this from the Wikipedia page now. Photographs of his hand holding a Hindu medallion on the front sleeve and American coins in the back, shot in this way.
Oh, that's really cool. If you've been affected by the issues on this show, if you've got a heart that needs transplanting, or if you'd like to ask us anything, get in touch with us. Our website is itsjustashow.com, and we're on Twitter at itisjustashow. We'd love to hear from you. This show is made possible by listeners like you. For as little as $1 per episode, you can help us research and record this show, and you can listen to all our superfan bonus bits. Find out more at itsjustashow.com/Patreon or patreon.com/itsjustashow. And if you want to follow up on anything that was mentioned today, you'll find links in our show notes at itsjustashow.com/episode/80.
Well, Adam, we've dealt with the Castle of Fu Manchu and all its glorious racism. And you know what? I do want to say before we finally say goodbye to this film, I'm super glad that Crow went on his rant about the yellow face and the tradition of white actors getting Asian roles and how even in the early 90s, MST3K was able to make fun of this. And yet it's still happening today. I'm so glad that they talked about it. But anyway, it's time to put this episode aside and think about what we'll be doing next time. Hey, I think next time is going to be sort of the spooky time of year. Are we going to do a nice spooky movie?
Yes, we're going to do Posture Pals.
Oh, no.
And Appreciating Our Parents. Wait, those are just the shorts. We're going to do a little movie that features John Carradine and Tor Johnson, The Unearthly.
Oh, wow. We're sticking with season 3, episode 20.
Mm-hmm.
Huh. I guess if we did all that season 8, it's fair to stick around in season 3 and catch up here.
Yeah, it's a palate cleanser.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, meanwhile, you just have to get ready for Halloween. What are you dressing up as this year?
I'm going to be dressed up as stressed person with too much work to do.
I'm going to be dressed up as person hiding in bed, trying to avoid any children who are trying to spread disease door to door.
That sounds wise, actually.
All right. Well, on that note,
More like Fu Manchu.
the world shall hear from us again. Take it away, theme squad.
British actors love to work and they'll appear in anything.